Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another weekly debate session organized by the Debate Club, a platform where people engage in healthy debates and discussions. The topic for this week is buns should be banned. Agree or disagree? Bunds are organized shutdowns or strikes where businesses, educational institutions, and transport services are forcibly closed to protest or demand specific actions. However, these bunds can disrupt normal life negatively and can also lead to violence. The Supreme Court of India has banned them, recognizing these negative impacts. On the other hand, these same bunds serve as a form of freedom of expression and expression of protest, which are used to highlight major issues that prevail in the society. They have been used historically during India's independence movement. While bans are illegal, hartals, which are similar shutdowns, are still legal in India. Considering these points, it becomes essential that we choose a balanced approach to address grievances without causing undue harm to citizens or businesses. I'd like to tell you guys that there is a fact sheet on the topic that you can access from the WhatsApp group. With that context in place, I now open the floor for debate. Anybody who wishes to speak on the topic can raise their hands using the reaction button, and you will be given a chance to speak in the order of raise hands. Anybody who would like to go first, you would have to raise your hand using the reaction button. I see Harpreet. You can go ahead.
Hi, a very warm good morning to one and all present here. Today, as we are discussing the topic of buns, I think it is a powerful expression to light some social changes. By shutting down some or the other normal activities, they serve as a wake-up call, urging the policymakers to address some important issues. It embroidered the spirit of unity among the people and the workers who are calling the buns. And I agree, even though Supreme Court has banned the buns, I think court decision can change over time. Even a constitution and the constitution makers allow this type of protest. The Constitution of India allows citizen of India to protest under Article 19A of the Right to Protest Act, with the addition of Trade Union Act 1926 and Industrial Dispute Act 1947 to serve and protect the right of people and the workers calling the protest. And we cannot forget the Quit India movement was also a bun which ended the British rule in India. So, with the closing statement, I disagree with the fact that bun should be banned.
Thank you so much, Harpreet. That was a great opening statement. I believe that Harpreet is of the opinion that buns are a form of expression of protest, and hence he disagrees that buns should be banned. Great points, Harpreet. Next up will be Akash. You can go ahead. Akash, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Okay. In that case, Venkat, you can go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So I wanted to address a couple of points. It is true that buns have been historically a part of India's independence movement. The reason that form of protest was used was because the British gave us no other constitutional ways of protest. That is one reason. And the other reason is that Gandhi recognized very early on that the British rule of India depends on the cooperation of Indians. It was not purely by force, against the will of the people. There were powerful sections of Indian society that supported British rule, and that the British were ruling India with the cooperation of some Indians. And so he wanted to create a non-cooperation movement, specifically with the aim of weakening British rule in India, demonstrating to the British that they cannot take Indian cooperation for granted, and that they will be forced to make changes, reforms, etc., to their rule. That is the historical context for that. The most important point is that the British did not allow constitutional methods of protest. And when unveiling the constitution, when unrolling the constitution in Parliament for the first time, Dr. Ambedkar pointed this out and said that the peculiar circumstances of India's independence movement had accustomed Indians to the notion that it is right to come out in the streets to bring normal life to a halt and to disrupt the economic life of the people. And he expressed a fervent hope that that form of protest will disappear, will go away in independent India, because independent India had a constitution which allowed constitutional methods of making the people's views on any topic known to their elected representatives. You elect the people that represent your views, and then you work through your elected representatives to effect changes in the laws and changes in the rules. Unfortunately, precisely what Dr. Ambedkar feared has come to pass. We have continued to use Bandhs as a method of getting the attention of the authorities. And I have personally experienced many Bandhs, as have most of us. And I don't remember any Bandh where I was personally interested in the outcome. But the shutdown was forced on me because a small number of people wanted to bring attention to some issue that affected them. They believed they had the right to inflict shutdown on the rest of us. So I don't believe that Bandhs have a place in independent India, and I think that they should be banned. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. Those are some really great points. I really appreciate how you have showed us the difference between pre-independence and post-independence India. These two are like two different situations, and hence, I think you are of the belief that there are other constitutional ways of expressing what you protest, or expressing or highlighting what the issues that are prevalent in the society. Next up, I think, will be Akash.
Thank you. I am Akash. I am in favor of Venkat's argument, but I want to put more weight to that argument as well. Like, people often present Bandh as an expression of political freedom. But most often than not, like when you impose Bandhs, especially in Kerala, I'm from Kerala, where Bandhs are very common. Schools are being shut down, educational institutions or shops are being shut down, even forcibly. But when Bandhs are imposed on such a scale and which can have a deep social sanction on the local level, people tend to forget that the normal people also have political freedom to not ascribe to certain political philosophies or political demands. People often forget that the normal people who don't ascribe to any or don't commit to any political inclinations or don't have any grandiose narrative of politics should also have freedom to not participate in these events. But in Kerala, it's very particular. It comes from all the political spectrum, left and right, that when a certain bandh is imposed, if you are not locally in supportive of that bandh, then you are essentially socially sanctioned, or maybe you might even suffer damages to your property. I believe there needs to be both legal and social sanction against this political imposition of will. And even if all of Kerala, all of entire local area decides to say, yeah, I am in support of bandh, and if one guy or one girl decides to say, I am not in support, she should not be facing any political or social sanctions from the rest of the society. I believe that's what we will give true justice to our constitutional and democratic nature of our country. Thank you.
Excellent argument, Akash. I think you showed us a perspective on bandhs or strikes that most people fail to see because it is not as highlighted. Because I think a minority of people who do not want to be inclined to such political ideologies or agendas or whatever the outcome the protesters are looking for, I think these category of people are usually ignored, and they are essentially dragged into these bandhs or protest even though they don't want to sometimes. So those are some great points, Akash. Next up will be Prince.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. First of all, as Rose already clarified, that constitutionally buns are illegal as well as unconstitutional. But I would agree with Venkat and the previous speaker that the buns were kind of a result of a kind of ideology put into Indians, which was right according to that time by Mr. Gandhi, that uh, if you need to get the Britishers out of India, you need to participate into movements like Quit India movement or non-cooperation movement, because it led to economic losses for British. But as a nation, we have failed to kind of move away from that ideology and accept that after independence, those economic losses are for us itself. I don't think it needs any data backing, but recently in Karnataka in 2023, there was a 2-day band organized. And many of the organizations, according to their conservative estimates, it led to a loss of about 4,000 crores. Even apart from these financial losses, there are health crises and social issues that arise due to these situations. We have seen people facing issues. We have seen people not being able to go to the hospitals due to the forceful bunds that are organized. Additionally, on the legal part, yes, we are given right to protest, well, right to assemble, to be precise, but it is not unconditional. First condition is we have to assemble without arms. That is already inscribed in the law, and uh, I guess we all know that how peaceful and how kind of commemorative these kind of incidents are. We know there is a huge lot of violence and political pressure being put on the local businessmen and local people for these bunds to be successful. Secondly, the condition is that we have to maintain public order. That I leave to the intellect of the people here. I won't comment on that. But I guess someone did comment about giving a example of a constitutional protest. Then the protest that was held by Mr. Anna Hazare in Delhi against the corruptions by a particular government, that was a constitutional protest. They assembled. They did not, uh, try to face any political or economic losses to the nation. It was a totally legitimate constitutional protest. And uh, 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 I would just like to see that what do these bunds bring to the nation? Is it like just a way to exercise political power and suppress the other political theories, or is it something more than just mere personal interest? Yeah, Rose.
Thank you, Prince. That was a great point. Pre-independent India, when it came to the economic losses that were being caused by these bunds, I think those were suffered by the British who ruled India at that time. But in a country called India that is now independent, the occurrence of bunds, I think, causes economic loss to its own citizens. So it's better that we move towards protests that are more constitutional in nature. Great points, Prince. Next up is Raghav.
Yeah, I
Good
think, I
morning.
think,
Yeah, please.
I think, sorry, Raghu.
Raghu,
Yeah,
were
Did you
you
say
trying
Raghu or
to say
Raghav?
something?
Yeah, Raghu.
I said Raghav, Raghu. You're going to speak after Saju. I'm sorry if that
Okay,
came out.
fine. Raghav, Raghu is similar. Yeah, fine.
Okay,
I'll speak after that.
no problem, no problem.
All right. So, I think pretty much I agree with majority of the points stated here. I don't think that there's been a significant point made against the banning of buns. I mean, I'm not seeing anybody coming here and saying that, buns are to be celebrated. This is like the thing that we should celebrate. But still, like I want to add my contention as to why buns are like really detrimental to society, and I'm not sure if the right way is to ban it, but I want to explain why buns are detrimental. It's like buns are like, it's like somebody is pushed to a corner, and they see that there is no other way to get attention to the issue that they believe is important enough to be addressed. And they want to basically go and coerce everybody into paying attention to them. It's basically the fundamental preposition of Bandhs is that is a certain helplessness, right? Where does it make sense for somebody to organize a Bandh? Is that it's basically when they're pushed to a corner and they're completely helpless, but they still believe that there is something important that needs to be addressed. So they basically do a blackmail on the entire society to pay attention to them. This is what it is. And I don't believe that we are in a state of disarray that this is necessary. And there are better ways to, like I think most of the others also mentioned that there are better ways to do protest. And the way I see it is like Bandh is basically like holding the knife to somebody else's neck, and then like saying that if you don't give me what I want, I'm gonna do some damage here. And that is not a great thing. That is not something to be celebrated. That's not something to be especially celebrated as a right to protest or a right to or a citizenship right to sort of like oppose top down tyranny or something. Because I know that there are a lot of people out there, maybe not in this group, but there are a lot of people out there who believe that Bandhs are like a great way to deter authoritative government or something like that. It's not. The reason is that Bandhs, like I said, it's a mark of your helplessness, and you don't have to be helpless. There are better ways to operate with foresight and plan activities that are actually constructive to to preserve your interest. So let's say, for example, there is something that you want to get done. There is a certain law that is being passed which is against your interest. You can create awareness campaigns, and you can create certain initiatives to sort of get people on board and approach the government and make proposals, and create alternative initiatives that actually support your interests rather than stopping everything else that is going on in order to get somebody else to do what you want to get done. I think there are more proactive ways to preserve your interests. I believe that Indian citizens as a whole, we have to get to a more foresight driven initiative which will preserve your interests rather than at the neck of the moment, when things are about to change, you just try to disrupt everything else to preserve your interest. And I think a great example for this was the farmers protest. And we had a debate about this, and I believe that the farmers protests were very detrimental, right? They wanted something, and they basically held everybody else at hostage to get what they wanted out of it. And if you continue to entertain this trend, right, regardless of what the nature of the protest is, anybody can basically hijack the rest of the society to get what they want, and that is a dangerous thing. So that's where I would like to conclude.
Thank you so much, Raghav. I think that was a great way to look at it, that Bandhs arise out of helplessness. And in a democratic country like India, I don't think we are supposed to be helpless or we need to be helpless. There are alternative ways to protest or to highlight issues that are pertinent to us. But yes, Bandhs arise out of helplessness, and we need not go for Bandhs when we have other better constitutional and just better alternatives that do not economically impact the citizens in a negative way. Thank you, Raghav. Next up is Saju.
Okay. I will take exactly 2 minutes, not more. So let's imagine a situation wherein a minority community or a minority set of people in a democracy wants to express themselves. Now, they being minority, there is no democratic way for them to express themselves because their representatives do not listen to them because they are a minority. Number one. Number two, they are a minority and hence they do not have a standing in society wherein they can reach out to people. Number three, their voice may not be heard because the media, it doesn't make business sense to the media to represent the voice of the minority, right? Now, all these three things are basically taking away the forum of expression of thoughts for the minority. Meaning, in a society where there is a minority, their voice will not be heard. It is guaranteed. Now, my question here is, how do they express themselves? How do they put their views forward? And it is important to me because it is possible that in a democracy, the majority may be missing some viewpoints, right? So that's my question to this larger group. How do you guys think a minority set of population in a majoritarian democracy, how will they put their point of views forward?
Before we move ahead, Saju, I just have one question. Are you of the stance that buns should not be banned?
I am absolutely of the stance that bandh should not be banned and they should never be banned.
All right, thank you. So, Saju here believes that buns should not be banned because buns are a form of expression of protest, especially in cases of majoritarian democracies where the minorities and their viewpoints may not be heard due to majoritarian agendas or lack of support and coverage by the media. Thank you so much, Saju. Great points. Next up is Raghu.
Hello, hi. Good morning to everyone. My version about this is I'm completely against to the buns. Buns should be banned. And buns is a will create a negative impact for a growing economy like India. Because with buns, there will be a lot of chaos and disturbances in the society. For day-to-day labors will be there. They will be get affected. If one day is looted from their life, so there will be very much loss which incur to their daily needs, which will create income to them and medical assistance and lot many things, disturbance in government activities. So buns should be completely banned from the society, and I believe band is not is a word which is we have imported from pre-independence. Earlier, we used to have strikes and hartals, and this band is designed by the political parties like Bharat Bandh and all kind of things. So band will give a complete negative impact to the society. And I believe there is lot of other ways and means in giving a protest. I happen to listen sometimes way back in Japan. In Japan, when in their earlier times, when one company is not supporting to the employees, so there the people never thought of going for a band. Instead of that, instead of working for 8 hours or 10 hours, they started working for entire day. Means it's a shoe company, so they in the form of protest, they started making only right side shoe, not left side shoe. Only right side shoes they keep on making for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days like that, until unless the management come down and accept their proposal. So there is this is one example I'm putting, and there is many ways where we can give our protest by going for a fasting or working lot, working in only one mode, or there are many ways. If an intellectual people can sit and think, so it will come to a conclusion that. So I believe bunch will not give a solution to the civil society, because rather it will create a lot of disturbances. All bunch should be banned. Only peaceful protest at designated places should be allowed, because bunch hamper day-to-day life of an ordinary citizen. And freedom stops when someone else freedom starts, including economic freedom. So I believe bunch is not the correct way of doing the things in the society. So I'll keep on adding the points going further. As of now, my point of view is this only. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghu. Raghu has made some really great points. He believes that freedom also includes economic freedom, which is very much visibly restricted by protests which take place in the form of bunds because they disrupt normal life for civilians. And hence, he believes that there are more intellectual ways, more peaceful ways to protest and to highlight pertinent issues in society. Thank you, Raghu. Next up is Venkat.
Suri asked me to give an example of a constitutional protest, other than Bunds. One example is a signature campaign. If you gather enough signatures from enough people and submit it, the government is bound to take notice. This actually happened. It's not a theoretical thing. When COVID started, March 2020, and the lockdown was imposed, there were travel restrictions also for people coming in, for Indians coming in from other countries who happened to be abroad. Initially, everyone was blocked from entering India, including Indian citizens. And then soon afterwards, Indian citizens were allowed to come back, but not no foreigners were allowed to enter India, meaning no non-Indian citizens. But what happened was that if people of Indian origin, holders of OCI cards, overseas citizen of India cards, were also blocked from coming into India. Again, that may not have been much of a problem, but what happened was that the minor children of people living in India, their parents are living in India and they've sent their children abroad, OCI children abroad for education. They got stuck abroad and they couldn't come back. And, these are children, 20, 21 years old. They were not allowed to come into India and they had nowhere to go, literally. And what happened was that the parents of these children organized a signature campaign, and it got circulated on WhatsApp and various other groups. And eventually, the government changed their decision and allowed small groups of these minor children, OCI children, to come back to India. Whether the government was responding to the pressure of the signature campaign or not, I'm not sure. But the fact is, the signature campaign began, and the government did change their policy. And the parents of OCI children, as you can imagine, is a very small minority. It is a really tiny minority, but they were able to prevail, against the government decision at a really critical time, of COVID. Uh, Also, that is one form of protest. The other form of protest is having public meetings, right? The Constitution of India allows the right of assembly. And so, public meetings where speakers basically protest against a measure of the government or advocate a certain measure, um, are something that can be done, are done. And the more attendance you have in these meetings, the bigger these meetings, obviously, the more impact it will have. So those are two examples I can think of. You can also write letters. This is done in the West a lot. You can write letters to your elected representatives, as on the back of a signature campaign. I don't know. I don't think that happens a lot in India, but that's something that should happen more. There are many forms of constitutional protest, which do not involve disrupting the economic life of the country. That is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. Those were some great examples that you gave. So, two major examples that Venkat has given for constitutionally valid protests were signature campaigns and public meetings. And he also suggested writing letters to political representatives regarding the issues that need to be highlighted. Next up will be Suri.
Hey, thank you, Rose. Thank you, guys. I think that was quite helpful. So, this is my take. I think bunds are detrimental to the economy and like nation as a whole, uh, but they are also an effective tool so far. So just to give an example, like earlier, if people had to do something, one of the ways, like, to be very, very hostile to the other parties, like if you go 100, 150 years back, right? Once was not an option because economy was not that dependent. And if you once like stop doing your work, it would not as dramatically affect others because economies were much more local in general and everybody had much more strong control. So the only thing that you could do is basically yourself or like, try to sort the government, try to set up something on your own. Like if you go a little bit like back 200, 250 years, right? That is not happening anymore. But Bandhs do. And the reason is, I think, as everybody pointed out, I was trying to understand what are the good ways to kind of voice out your opinions without doing Bandhs. So I think those are some interesting ones. But I think, as someone mentioned it, it requires a lot of intellect, and it does require, and it probably is not as effective as Bandhs. So I think Bandhs are not good for the economy, but they are a valid means to an end for a lot of people, right? Any economically suppressed, or put behind, or somebody who is not care, like for example, healthcare industry. Like, if they don't do one, people don't even care about increasing their salaries and all, and those people have suffered, and they provide very critical service in some cases. Like, the teachers, the uh, teachers, doctors, and like few other critical workers. So honestly, they doing Bandhs dramatically affects us. But till we have a really good means to be able to handle that, that won't be happening. And I think some examples that were pointed out, although great, but they are not as effective yet. And that's why ideologically that will push forward. I am not in the favor of Bandh, but it just cannot stop it without enough backing, and the backing that we have is not enough. That's my stance. Thank you.
Thank you, Suri. So Suri is of the opinion that Bandhs are a valid means to an end, and while he may be in favor of the banning of Bandhs, he thinks they cannot be completely curtailed without enough evidence or enough backing for these Bandhs to be completely banned, and he's of the opinion that we do not have that backing yet. So thank you so much, Suri. Next up will be Prince.
So I guess the people who are kind of in support of Bandhs are getting a bit confused between a protest and a Bandh. So, according to the Journal of the National Human Rights Commission, which was written by Justice D.M. Dharmadhikari, he clearly stated that this forced stoppage of all public activities are a recurring nuisance that is occurring due to the Bandhs that happen in India. Additionally, he also stated that a call for Bandh hold out a warning that if they were to go out for work, they being the people of the locality, or open their shops, then they would be prevented, quote unquote, and his attempt to take his vehicle on the road will also be dealt with. Is it not just, as rightly pointed out by Raghav, a direct blackmail onto the people of the nation? Bandhs are, according to me, a superiority complex as it is forced, and the belief that all the people in the region should and would subscribe to their ideals or ideology. It is not always necessary that if a community is going on a Bandh for that specific reason, then all people in the community do subscribe to this. And hence, this forced nature of Bandh should be dealt with. Additionally, my previous speaker also pointed out that how minority should be represented. In a state like India, which is a socialist nation, special representation for minorities are given in legislature, including the communities of SC, ST, women. In some local and rural bodies, OBCs are given representation. Before the 104th constitutional amendment in 2019, Anglo-Indian were also given special representation directly through recommendation. So I assume that India, being a socialist nation and believing in the ideals of inclusivity, do give enough opportunities for the minority to represent themselves. If they do feel threatened, then they have a right to go to the courts or the local representatives if their natural right or fundamental right, even to the extent the judicial rights are being threatened. And Yeah, I guess the minority has as much as the reservation in the local and national bodies to be represented, even more than the majority ones. So I'll just end by saying minorities are equally Indians, and they get equal rights and opportunities as the majority people gets. Even keeping aside the reservation and the special representation that they're provided. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Prince. Great points. So Prince believes that these protests, which come in the form of buns, are essentially a superiority complex, since people who do not wish to subscribe to such protests are still forced to subscribe to them. Because, in a way, when buns happen, people's access to transportation and means of conducting business is restricted, which is very true. And as far as the question of the voice of minority in India is concerned, Prince is of the opinion that they are well represented in the arena of politics and administration, and that they have equal rights as the majority in India. Thank you, Prince. Next is Raghav.
Okay, thank you. So I want to address a point that Saju made. I want to thank Saju for representing the point of view that a lot of people hold outside of this forum. I think over here, I find everybody else statements pretty agreeable, but there are a majority of the people outside who believe that buns are actually a constitutionally valid form of protest that are guaranteed to protect the interests of minority groups, right? And so let's come to that point of like minorities having no power, and that they're basically pushed to a corner, and then they have to basically organize a brand, disrupt the rest of the society for them to be heard, because like nobody else backs their interest, the media or the political parties or whatever it is, to sort of like back their interest, because their voice is not as important either politically or from the agenda of the media or something like that. And I know from a logical standpoint that kind of makes sense, but think about a situation where a minority is powerful enough to organize a band, but is not powerful enough to create a political initiative to favor their interests, and then spread an awareness campaign or something like that to proactively protect their interests. I want to make a distinction here. Buns are not a proactive method of protecting your interests. They are basically a sort of like a coercive way of protecting your interests. You're coercing others into submitting to your demands. That is not the same as like proactively forwarding your interests. As a minority, even if you do not have the strength or like the population strength to back your interests, you have the political doorways to create the avenues for you to proactively protect your interests. So this means like acting with foresight. You look at the situation and you see that systematically you're oppressed as a minority, and you go and you create a political party to protect your interests. You create awareness to bring attention to your interests. You leverage the interests this country has in terms of the media or the political parties or whatever, to create alliances and create awareness to guarantee your interests. You can do that without ever relegating to buns or like any kind of destructive methods of protecting your interests. To say that minorities are like too helpless and therefore buns are required for them to protect their interests is basically you're basically like presupposing their helplessness as a minority. And it may be difficult. It is easier to protect the interest of the majority, and that is the nature of society. Like you have like 90% of people who want clean drinking water, and who want to have like freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Let's say there's a minority of people who want to go against the interests of the majority. It should be difficult for you to enforce your interests on the majority. So, but if you still want to do that, then you need to make sure that you're creating avenues for you to act with foresight and create the necessary political infrastructure for you to act within the bounds of what is legally valid to do that. Now, buns, if you keep encouraging buns, right, you're basically empowering helplessness. You're basically like kind of like validating helplessness, and you're trying to create encouraging helplessness to create more of it. Right? If I can be helpless, if I can be lazy enough to not proactively think and plan my interest and create the sufficient infrastructure to back it up, then I can still go ahead with a Bandh and then get what I want without doing all the work. That is what Bandh means, right? So, imagine a situation where, for example, let's say that I belong to a cult and I have a bunch of followers, and we all believe that like a goat demon god is the supreme god. Every other god is should be banned, and everybody who is worshipping any other god should be punished. And if I can go and enforce a Bandh on the rest of the society to get what I want, is that fair? So I want to leave it with that question. I'll let somebody else answer it. But also there's a tangential discussion going on in the chat regarding the OCI cards and things like that. But I'll leave it to that. But my point is that even though it's tangential, it's kind of important to make sure that the facts are checked. But yeah, I'll leave it here. Yeah.
Thank you, Raghav. So I believe that he is of the opinion that Bandhs are more coercive than proactive, and it is essentially arising out of a sense of helplessness. And if we are encouraging or celebrating protests that come in the form of Bandhs, we are also encouraging helplessness. So we'll be aiding helplessness. I think that is what he means. And he also made a really great point that a minority wanting something the majority does not should be difficult, but at the same time they should be able to put forth their viewpoints, their interests and opinions without disrupting the larger society or society at large. So great points, Raghav. Next up is
Rose, you're on mute. Can you say who's next up?
Harpreet, I think. Okay, was I on mute the whole time?
No, not the whole time. You just said next up and then you went on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Next up is Harpreet.
So some of the delegates here made some points like the economic impacts. Let's talk about that. While it is true that Bandhs can disturb the normal life and affect the businesses and the daily wage earners, they are often the only last resort when the other means of communication and negotiations have failed. Like some of the people here mentioned farmers' protests from the state of Punjab, Haryana, UP, Bihar, and all. So, as the residents of one of the state, I can say that the farmers were sitting for 1.5 year doing the so-called peaceful protests according to the constitution and some people here, but they were not heard by the central government, not even their MPs, not even their MLAs. None of them heard. So that was the last resort for them to go to Delhi and do the protest and all. So the second point is violence. It is important to differentiate between the intention of the Bandhs and violent people in there. Not everybody sitting in the bun are what we say in confidence of doing violence. Some of the people, one or two people, start the violence and it spread like wildfire. So the majority don't want any violence, so that are sitting in the buns. Just one or two different factors hit it differently. And some of the people say that minority people or the bun doing people hold their economic activity. So I'm sorry to say, but they are also the citizen of India and they have the right to protest. Thank you very much.
So, great points, Harpreet. Harpreet is of the opinion that Bandhs should not be completely banned. They can be used as a form of protest when everything else fails, and they can be used as the last resort when your voice is not being heard despite all other efforts that you've initially put in. I think that was the argument he was trying to make. Thank you, Harpreet. Next up is Akash.
Yeah, I really liked how our discourse is going. But one interesting thing that I noticed was that most of us are against the idea of Bandh or against the economic disruption that is caused by Bandh. But I believe the actual reason behind is that we are actually privileged. The fact that we can discuss on these matters on a Saturday morning is testament to that. But as a country which is plagued by historical and social injustices, the constitutional machinery to express political dissent is a luxury that most people can't afford in this country. And that's more relevant for tribal regions, be it the Bastar region, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand region. When you are pushed, when you are pushed to the corner and there is no other means or no, when you don't even when the constitutional machinery don't even consider your grievances. There is no other means to express your dissent other than radically just coming and coercively putting your thumb down. And it was Arundhati Roy who said this. Like, she said, you can't do a hunger strike when you're already starving and no one is looking at you. Like, a hunger strike and all these constitutional measures in general needs an audience, needs a machinery which respects your individuality, which considers you as a legitimate part of the political machinery. But that is not the case for most of the citizens of our country. So I believe outright banning and outright disregarding a certain form of protest, which doesn't fit into the narrative of the civil protest for us, for people like us who are relatively privileged, who have access to constitutional machineries in a more efficient way, is outright denying of political expression for many people. And the word constitutional is being flouted very often in our discussion. And I agree, we should stick on to the constitutional principles of protest and dissent. But what about the constitutional promises that were made to the millions of minority and millions of historically subjugated people of our country, who never got into the same footing, which allowed them to essentially practice or exercise their political will in a more democratic manner? I believe that's also something we should take into consideration before taking an outright banning or outright shutting down of a certain form of political expression. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akash. So Akash made some really great points here. So he is of the opinion that this fundamental disregard that the delegates or participants in this session or anyone else may have against Bandhs is coming from a position of privilege, essentially. So he believes that Bandhs should be a valid form of political expression when all else fails. I think it is a continuation of what the last speaker has tried to tell us, that it should at least be the last resort instead of it being completely disregarded as a form of expression. Thank you, Akash. Next is Sajid.
Raghav, who is next?
You're next, Saju. You're up.
Okay, I have a very short argument. Those who all of the debaters who spoke in favor or spoke against the practice of Bandh as a protest, the practice of Bandh and in favor of banning Bandh, right? How is your argument not supporting the Britishers who acted against the protesters of Quit India movement, the freedom fighters, right? This argument is favoring the British rule, right? How is it not favoring the British rule?
Is that an open question where anybody can answer, or do you want to complete your point?
Yeah, like, was that the point? Was that all?
Is that a
or
rhetorical question?
It was not a rhetorical question. I mean, I've heard the people who were in favor of banning Bandh, okay? And if you see, all your arguments are in favor of the British rule. Now, my second point is, yeah, go ahead.
No, actually, I don't know if you joined earlier, but Venkat spoke about this at the very beginning of the whole session. He talked about like how there is a completely different dynamic between pre-independent India and post-independent India, and how Bandhs were essential during the British rule because we are being ruled by a group of people who do not hold our interests at heart, and they are basically extracting wealth out of this country, and they required the cooperation of our people to continue to do that. So Bandhs was basically like the only last resort because without our cooperation, they cannot continue to extract wealth out of us. So by
how do you
exercising
think
Bandhs,
that is not happening today?
Saju,
What do you think? Why do you
Raghav,
think?
Saju and Raghav, I think we can take this as an open question and put it in the discussion part of the session. I think that would be much better, so that we can all
Yes.
have a say on this, right? What do you think,
Then
Saju?
I
Sure,
would I
sure.
would like to make my second point and then relinquish the mic.
Yes, please go ahead.
So the classic case is that of farmers' protest, wherein the farmers, though the parliament in India was having farmers' representation, the farmers' laws, the three farmers' laws, were passed using a voice vote, wherein lot of people expressed protest against the laws, but they were not heard. They were simply not heard. Even though they were asked to speak in the parliament, there were very valid points raised in the parliament. Even though they were having the representation and the voice in the parliament, their voice and opinions did not influence the power, the people in power. So when that happened, it has already happened. The parliament has become a place where everything is now being decided by vote, by majority vote. It is not decided by intelligence. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Saju. So Saju has brought into discussion the case of farmers' protest, where farmers raised very valid points in the parliament, and despite having valid arguments, according to Saju, their voice was unheard, as in their points or their opinions did not have any sort of influence uh, on the political authority. So he believes that everything nowadays is being decided on the basis of majority vote instead of general intelligence. Thank you, Saju. Next up is Taiba.
Good morning. My take is that bans are not a good idea socially because it teaches people to disrupt society's safety and economy with using force. But at the same time, as much as sending letters as a suggested alternative to bans can create change, bans create a louder social awareness and place more urgent pressure for more immediate change than the sending of a letter would. So, as much as I don't agree with bans, my take is that bans should continue unless there are ways that are as effective to get the attention for change as quickly as bans do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taiba. So what Taiba is saying that while she is not completely in favor of buns being used regularly, she believes that they have a greater social and political impact due to their coercive nature, and they should not be completely banned because certain issues do require these kinds of protests. Thank you, Taiba. Next up is Saju.
I made my point already.
All right, okay, no worries. Your hand was raised. Venkat, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so the one argument that has been used in favor of buns is that it is a weapon of the weak, and that if you don't have, even in independent India, if your voice is not heard for whatever reason, then you may be left with no choice except to organize a bund. I just wanted to look at the reality. I think we should all look at the reality of how bunds are in fact organized and who organizes bunds in India. Uh, because the point about the being a weapon of the weak, it's a good theoretical point, but in reality, in practice, in India, bunds are most often called by political parties, usually by the opposition, but sometimes even by the ruling party in a state when they want to protest against some measure of the central government or something like that. And so, a political party, by definition, is not a powerless entity. It is not a weak entity. If they are strong enough to organize themselves into a political party and have representation in the assembly or in parliament, it follows that they have some measure of power, which they should use responsibly. And that does not include buns. That is one part of it. The people who call for buns are most often political parties, and the people affected by buns again are not people like us. Who I agree we are relatively privileged. In the sense that we are able to talk about it. In many cases, for those of us who work in the IT industry or any other industry where remote work is possible, buns do not affect our work. We just stay at home and work. The people most affected by buns are the poorest classes of society. I've seen auto drivers sitting idle. We've all seen auto drivers sitting idle when they would much rather be out, ferrying passengers. Those are transport strikes. And then, overall Bandhs, there are fruit and vegetable sellers, all kinds of street hawkers, again, very poor people, who survive, who need the daily wages in order to survive. They live a hand-to-mouth existence, and they are also prevented from plying their trade by Bandhs. And I agree with the point I think Raghav made about the coercive nature of Bandhs. It forces a number of people who are either indifferent to the purpose of the Bandh or who are actively against the Bandh into the orbit of the Bandh, and it forces them to give up their daily wages. And in some cases, it just forces them to stay at home and work. So it is coercive. It is not democratic, and it affects the most vulnerable and the poorest sections of our society. And so there may be some cases where a bandh is justified. I wouldn't say that a bandh is never justified, but in my experience, what I have seen in my own lifetime is 9 out of 10 bandhs were avoidable, and there were certainly better methods of getting attention to their cause. And so I would still be strongly in favor of banning bandhs, despite the arguments that I've heard to the contrary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venkat. Great points there. So Venkat made a very great point that Bandhs essentially affect the poorest sections of society, people who rely on daily wage to survive. And they are mostly undemocratic in nature. And despite being in favor of banning Bandhs, Venkat is of the opinion that it's not the case that Bandhs are never justifiable, but in most cases, they are not. Thank you, Venkat. Next up will be Samarth.
Hello. I'm of the opinion that in present India, most of the bunds that that have been called, it is like unjustified because, as many speakers have previously pointed out, it is counterproductive, and the band organizers, they would be better off, using other constitutional means to make their voices heard. So I would agree with that one, but still I would say that for some sections of Indian society, at least they have been suppressed, and their voices aren't heard through any other means. This also has been a point made by some of the speakers. I would like to elaborate on this later point a bit. I was recently reading about the rise of left-wing extremism in India, and what I found was it originated, I believe, in the tribal parts of India. That is where it gained strength the most. And if you look at the reasons, it was essentially that the Indian state, it just treated the tribals who were living initially as squatters and confiscated their ancestral lands and gave leases to mining companies to extract the resources. So, like, I would say this situation is very similar to how the British treated Indians in general. Some of the tribal people, they experienced similar kind of a thing, under the hand of the Indian state. Like, just hearing these sentences, it might make some of the people, a bit angry, because they might consider such a statement like anti-nationalist or unpatriotic. But let us think in this way, like, we can all, as patriotic people, we can agree that India is like a great country in the abstract. But when we criticize the Indian state and not the Indian nation as an abstract entity, we can all agree that India is like a great country. But also at the same time, we can criticize the Indian state when it acts in such tyrannical and unjust manners. So in this particular case, like, we cannot say that the tribals had any legitimate means or constitution means to make their voices heard. Because when a group of people, they are like essentially like thrown out from their ancestral homelands and dispossessed in every way possible. And I don't think they even got to represent their voices in any of the representative bodies, because you can very well imagine a situation where they were even suppressed from voting. When all of these atrocities are being done, you can imagine them being suppressed from voting too. So when they are like suppressed in every way imaginable, what they did was turn to the most destructive and the most destructive ideological people in the country, who were highlighting the Marxist and Maoist, not the Marxist, it's the Marxist Leninist Maoist parties, who thought a violent revolution was a legitimate means of achieving power. They turned to the most extreme sections of the Indian political spectrum. So if they had more voices, if their voice could be made heard in more moderate forums, then they would not have resorted to turning to the most extreme sections of the Indian political spectrum. So these are the things that I wanted to highlight, that in fact, the experience of some of the people in post-independence India, it had been as brutal as the British had suppressed Indians. And that, so that will be my point. And also the one more thing is there are all of these constitutional means available, you could say, but then when all of these when the people are actively suppressed, at one point you can say that they are justified in taking up some form of active resistance measures, because it cannot be a situation where all of the obligations they are placed on the oppressed people to just bear the brunt of the oppression, and none of the obligations they are of the state, it is met by the state to protect the rights of the people. So it becomes like a situation where there is absolutely no quid pro quo, and all of the this idea of the social contract, it is not being followed, and just all of the obligations are being placed upon the oppressed people and none upon the state. So this is a very unjust and unbalanced situation, and at least in these situations people are somewhat justified in adopting more more resistance techniques. So those are my comments.
That was really insightful, Samarth. I'll let Ram speak next.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, firstly, I would like to add that this is my first time here, and I did not join the call right at the start. So if I did anything out of the ordinary, please let me know. Please let me know about that. So there were few great points by everyone in the call. So I would like to address some points. Firstly, Saju's point on how we are the Britishers now. I mean, not exactly us, like the privileged politicians or the current state which is being in India. So how it is, how he compared it to the Britishers. I would like to come back to this point later, but I just want to say on Raghav's point, like if the minorities can do buns, they can definitely do the other means. Like if they are strong enough to do buns, then they are definitely strong enough to do the other ways of getting their needs done. So my only argument to this is, yes, it is a completely valid point, and my only argument to this is like if a certain set of people chose Bandh as an option, that definitely means then they are not organized or to the extent of people who are in this meeting at least, right? Because if they are organized, then they would definitely not consider Bandh at the beginning of their options. If there are no other resort, then that can be a separate issue. But they, in general, are people who are oppressed. They don't have the organization of a. They don't have a particular leader who they all follow, something like that. So it is always a point of, I don't think we have any other option. I think we should go ahead with this. So that could be most of the cases. And there are obviously other kinds of bonds which are done for the politicians' interests and their selfish interests. So I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about the other kind of bonds. And buns as a point of bullying. Yeah, definitely. Buns are treated as bullying. So uh, if we have a protest phase, we have a lot of protest phase. And if we chose bun, then that means it is sort of a bullying, right? So my point to that is, for the sake of my argument, I would like to talk about buns like a point of disobedience. So we can, yeah, ban, I mean, we can stop the highways, but we cannot stop and chase the people who are coming to the highways. And we can, yeah, stop the people from opening their shops, but we cannot uh, show any form of violence on that. So for the sake of my argument, I'm just talking about buns as a point of disobedience that was done previously by our uh, independence leaders. So are we the Britishers now? So that is a good point. So definitely not. Right now, at least in 2024, we are nowhere close to being Britishers. But does that make us safe? No. It can take very little time to from going to ideal state to very bad state, and the vice versa as well. We can see Japan as an example. They were war-torn after World War II, and they fought their way back to becoming a great nation. And it can always go in the opposite way as well, like in the many other countries. So if we ban buns, banning buns is a like it's a great argument. Banning means essentially we are saying it is illegal and it is strictly punishable if someone is going to this option. So it is a dangerous water to go, because um, obviously the nation is driven by the media always. So if a certain group of people are always said that any form of let's say let's say they did a relatively lesser extent of bandh, like disobedience, but it can be portrayed as a bandh to the media, through the media, so that by the politicians can have the power to enforce it like a bandh, and they can use it for their selfish reasons, for their political gains. So we cannot exactly ban it, because it can be used as a negative way by the politicians. Also, banning something is always dangerous, because if we keep on banning things we don't like, then definitely there will be a state of how Britishers did that. So if we keep on banning buns, then what comes next? We will ban the protesting next. We'll ban the disobedience. Anything said by the state has to be followed next. So if we keep on the terms of banning something, then that is definitely a dangerous argument. We can, however, limit it. Like we can give rules to say this is acceptable, but this is definitely not acceptable. Are people going to be constitutionally punished using that? Yes, definitely they should be punished. But should there also be consequences using those as a means? Yes, definitely there should be. So just one last point. I think I'm taking a lot of time. So uh, yeah, buns used by politicians should definitely be treated differently to how the buns used by the people, like the tribal people mentioned and the minorities. Yeah, that's where I should end this argument. Thank you.
Great argument, and I think we also have a new perspective on the argument on the topic. So I think it was your first time in the debate club sessions. So I think that was a great argument for a first time, Ram. You are welcome to join more of our sessions, and we would really appreciate that. Next up will be Raghu.
Yeah, hi. The culture of Bandh had its origin from the civil disobedience movement in 1940s way back. It was then against an occupying power, as rightly mentioned the British rule, earlier speakers. It was then against an occupying power, and Bandh strikes and hartals were meant to make governments for the foreign power difficult. It was more for them to make the ruling or making money, grabbing money from the citizens of this nation, to make them more difficult. But now this is not the scenario. It is now the aim to aim of Britishers to make their staying in India more and more expensive and force them to leave. That was the main objective by Gandhis and Gandhis and so other national leaders to adopt this Bandh concept. Now it has changed. Now it is our own people, our own government, our own properties, and then why we trying inconvenience and destroy by resorting to such bunds, this Bharat Bandh or any political party Bandh or any as such. All to It is my opinion, all political parties across the board are guilty of this crime because this. I feel it is my opinion. Whether people will agree or disagree, I don't know. But Bandh is a kind of a crime these political parties are imposing in this civil society. Common citizenry, including the party workers, need to remain vigilant, not to join in any. It's a goon or a vulnerable politician who wants to grab news coverage. They assemble a little mob and set few ties on major road. So raise some slogans and tipping up a new banners. Will grab news on the front pages of local. He has taken the step becoming a neta. It is more of a fantasy or doing great things by adopting these bunds, Bharat bunds. But my understanding too is educating young minds of this nation by catching them very early and putting an end to concept of band culture at all. I'm talking of band culture, only band. And I'm okay for protesting and hartals and all these things are fine. But as a nation, people call Bharat Bandh or Bharat Bandh. So let all everything from top to bottom, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, let all stops working. And I feel it will take some to 15 to 20 years or more than that also in making these young minds to put an end to the culture of Bandh. And politicians from pre-independence era today are guilty of handing over a loaded gun to a child who does not know how to. See, these are all the things politicians which have been grabbed from the pre-independence this thing. I'm again reiterating panwala, rickshaw puller, auto driver, wayside eatery shop, small shopkeeper will be suffering the most uh, of these bunds because these are the people who will mm, mm, who as a part these are the largest section of the society who are a part of a GDP because I recently read somewhere like IT returns and salary segment people is only contributes of 2% of this tax system. Remaining all are GSTs only from these small vendors. And unfortunately, I don't understand. Sometimes it's an illusion for the people who call Bandhs because people obey a Bandh without knowing what is the reason for a Bandh. Uh, See, I recently hired where the apartment where I live now. People, today there is a Bandh because school children and college people they stay at home enjoying. I'll ask them why they are at home today, not going to the college. They say it is Bandh today. What is the reason for Bandh? And they no say no. Our management told don't come today. There is big Bandh is going on outside, so don't come to the college and school. So, and I feel I want to put to the point that here in 2015, Assam government made some 3,000 crores to the tune of 3,000 crores alone in the year 2014. In 2015 article they have published, they have released a note stating that in entire 2014, they incurred a loss of 3,000 crores as a small state like Assam. So this Bandh, I don't say completely should be banned, but it should be more regulated kind of things should be taken place. So this is all from my end, and I feel there is change.org is a website which is there across the globe. If anyone wants to put a word, they can sign on it, change.org, sign a petition, and that petition will be delivered to the concerned people. For example, if I want some solution instead of making a Bandh, then I'll ask some 10,000 or 1 lakh people to sign that petition, and that petition will reach to the president of this country or prime minister of this country, and that petition will make them to do some kind of justification for the need that petition is signed for. So this is all from my end.
Thank you so much, Raghu. Next up will be Prince. Before Prince goes ahead, guys, I would appreciate it if your arguments are kept a little shorter. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Yeah, before I go ahead, first of all, I would just like to put forth a political theory that what could happen if Bandhs are made legitimate? Will the majority not take more use of it than the minority because it's a coercive factor? Won't the quantity matter here? Will this not lead to the point of the Matsya, the theory given by Chanakya, where the bigger fish will always eat the smaller fish and smaller fish will never get represented? Additionally, to the part of the farmers' protest, it's not on the topic, so I'll keep it short. 37.24% of the people in our parliament are agriculturalists. No, it's again the superiority speaking, where people believe that all farmers should support the protest and should be against the bill presented or the law. Where is free will here? If we can shut down 5 to 10% of agriculturalists in the parliament, we can't shut down 37.24% of the parliament. I don't agree to this ideology, or I don't subscribe to this whole protest thing. Being from a farmer's background, majority of farmers don't. 58% of Indian population basically depend on agriculture as a primary source of their livelihood. Now, if 58% of Indians are on street, do we actually believe that a democracy would make such a law that could threaten his power? Now, last but definitely not the least, if we are talking privilege, let's talk it. Now, communist is a great example on this topic because, rightly said, Jharkhand and West Bengal, the regions are most affected by it. Me being a lot related to this topic, as I'm from the region of Jharkhand and southern Bihar, I could give you a bit of insight into the topic. Not even 5% of the people support these communist movements. The communists use these movements, and they use the medium of violence as a way to threaten the community, to rape women, to kidnap people, for human trafficking and child trafficking, to conduct outright raids on the community, and to loot the community. Alarms are sounded in the regions where the communists attack, and rightly equated with Bandhs, both are coercive and force. So thanks for that. This point is particularly special for me because I lost my uncle in this quote-unquote war with communism. He was a bodyguard of some politicians I would rather not name, and he was sleeping at night when he was killed. The reason was eco clash. They wanted him to join the revolution, but he disagreed. Is this not outright superiority complex that all the people of the community or the region should subscribe to us because this ideology is greater than all? I personally know many of the people who joined this movement not because they subscribed to this ideology, because they sought power. They saw this as a medium of getting power. for legal reasons. They are back to the main framework, and they are well assimilated in society now. Uh, uh, this is just the main issue with Bunds or ideas such as communism. Sorry, but let me give you the ground reality. People don't support them. These communists halt development. They attack the construction workers who are there. They try to and actively work to keep the people poor and excluded so that they can be used as meat shield and a way to blackmail the government. I'm sorry if coercive is the way, then this will just lead to another communist movement in the nation. We have seen which has led to no particular development. The people are suppressed. The political rights are denied to these people. Voting is not being allowed in these regions, and the people are actively killed or rather butchered by these demons. Yaros. Sorry for taking so long.
No worries, Prince. Crisp argument there, and I'm sorry that happened to your uncle. I hope his soul rests in peace, and I hope you find peace too on that situation. Next up, I'll let Suri go ahead.
Thank you. Prince, I'm really sorry to hear that, first of all. I hope we I think like there were some excellent arguments made, and I think if you try to talk about, like, there are quite a few things that everybody's agreeing on. First of all, like, funds are not good economically. It affects poor. I don't think I've heard any argument that says otherwise, but we're sort of debatable. And also there has been an argument made, if you make it completely illegal, then there would be consequences, or consequences of whoever is on the subjugated, and specifically if the authorities are the ones regulating. So somebody did mention regulating it. If the authorities are ones regulating it, they would not let those happen. Again, good example is farmers protest. I think they wanted to kind of do it on Jantar Mantar, that's the location, right? And they did not allow them. Now, there could have been other reasons, but similar things does happen where if you don't want to support something, you don't want something to come to light, you would not support them at all. That is a risk that always runs. Now, on the other side, if you try to make it legal, somebody did rightly point out, the bigger fish will eat the smaller fish. People who are in majority will try to take advantage of it, and if you make it illegal, then again, somebody who is they will extend it and do something. So I think it is a very, very nuanced topic, and it cannot be outright called as oh, we will ban it in completion, or we will we will allow it completely. That's completely fair. I think it's in very, very gray zone. So there are some parts of it which could be banned. For example, in the name of when somebody getting extreme violence, so they should be, rather than treating them for they try to do one, they should be kind of charged for doing that violence. That is clear cut. Yes. Now, there are another aspect of it. I think if you're working in a critical service, and if you do a protest, it is very, very clearly seen. But if you're not in the critical service, people might intend to hamper critical areas so that other people get notice of whatever they are trying to do. So that way, it becomes very, very challenging to say that, okay, what is clearly right and wrong. So there are clear outliers in some cases which are clearly very bad, and there are clear outliers which are clearly good, right? But in the short term, it is means to an end, which seems to work in some cases. Now, when you try to ban it, those cases won't work, and they will try to find other means which might not be as suitable. So I think the best approach would be to create, as somebody mentioned, change.org, signing petitions and all of that. I think those are good, but those might not be enough. We need better means. If we have better means, then probably we can extend the area that we are saying that, okay, these things are not valid because you have these other means that you can definitely clearly take, and it is recognized. And if it does something if you go beyond this, or for example, signature movement, let's say if you get 1,000 signatures, so 1 lakh signatures, there would be some discussion on it. For example, we are having it here. Suppose there is a topic that raised wisely enough. we will take it up for discussion. If something similar happens and people are willing to listen to the ideas that is being passed around, rather than, okay, no, this is what I have decided already and I cannot change my mind, versus when people are willing to listen and adapt and, like, recalibrate to a potential of recalibrate. They don't necessarily need to do it, but have a potential to recalibrate. I see that completely missing, and that makes it very, very challenging to kind of decide, okay, no, outright this should be legal or outright this should be illegal. That's where I see the challenge with this topic. Uh, that's my take. I don't think so. I have a clear stand here, but yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Suri. I believe Akash was raising his hand earlier. If you want to go ahead, you can go ahead, Akash.
Actually, my argument was put beautifully by Suri. That's why but I would like to add it, like, the proposition of banning something and legalizing something is something that we need to take a little more seriously. Like in the case of Section 377, homosexuality, when you essentially legalize something, there is two options. You can either go ahead with it or no go ahead with it. But when you ban something, you can't go ahead with it. So when you ban buns in general, as someone already mentioned, that okay, most buns are non-justifiable and it's just a superiority expression by the political parties. But there are some justifiable buns. And when you ban those, you ban even the justifiable ones as well. So I believe by respecting the political, I believe having a certain ban on certain kind of political expression can outright disregard these disparities in our country, and which will lead to build up of various other political issues that might prompt out or that might explode in some more horrendous manner in the future. And there was also another thing that I want to mention. People, like, they were in this discourse, they were mentioning about farmers' protest and other communist protest, and how it was tainted by political superiority to some regard. But again, using one or two examples to essentially extrapolate it to have a complete picture of Bandh as a political expression, or any political expression for that matter, is gross generalization. And when we do that, we are again disregarding the disparities in the legal and political dynamics of and the lived realities of millions of people in this country. And there was also this point that was in my mind that might come out as a little less patriotic, but I want to address it as well. We are different from that, where people were saying that we are different that and constitutional freedom and etc. But do we actually, like, aren't we again tainted by the same constitutional hypocrisy that the British had? Again, our promises, the constitutional promises that were laid for the tribals, for the northeasterns, or the minorities in this country, can you really stand up and say, yeah, that has been delivered? And people can have work in the same footing to express their political means. That's not the lived realities of people in this country. And in such a dynamic landscape, I believe a dynamic political machinery and political expression should also be there. And outright banning something will only lead to curtailing of freedom and build-up of social anxiety and resentment, which will only explode to create larger chaos in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akash. Next up, Harpreet.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So we have all talked about the advantages, disadvantages of one. So what now? I propose three solutions to this issue. First of all, political parties should never be allowed to call any bans. Only trade unions, farm unions, or other NGOs should be allowed. Secondly, I propose a commission to be made that will talk to the protesters and directly report to the Prime Minister, Chief Minister, or any regarding authority. Thirdly, hospitals, educational institutions, and am I audible? Someone said that I'm not in the chat.
You are audible to me. I mean, I think
You are
someone,
audible. You are audible.
I think there's a problem with your device, Samarth. It's okay, Harpreet, you can go ahead.
So, as I was saying, a commission should be made that will talk to the protesters and directly report to the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister or any concerning authorities. Thirdly, hospitals and other necessities, especially the educational institutions, should not be affected from the protest. And I urge everyone to find some solutions, because we cannot let our future generation sit at home and fear to go out due to some bans. We cannot let our future generations to sit like us and debate on the topic.
Thank you so much, Harpreet. I think Raghav, you can go ahead, and with your argument, I'd appreciate if you also give us a closing statement so that we can start with the closing statements.
I'm not sure if I'm as qualified enough to give a closing statement, but I will conclude with my points on this. I think that I, even though I've been like against buns and like I hate buns and I want it to be banned, I do see the merit of it. There are valid instances where people are driven to that point of helplessness, where it does make sense to sort of like instead of just like doing it for the sake of disrupting others, there is actually like a valid interest at heart. I mean, there was a case with Vedanta, like Vedanta Steel or something like that. They were trying to like kind of like occupy tribal lands, and this was a situation where like the tribals had like no time to actually organize a political movement or something like that to avoid something like this, and they don't have the wherewithal to do that. And I don't know if a bunch of NGOs came together and then like they supported the cause by creating a band and all that. It to me, as a human being who values integrity against like corporate interests and something like that, I would actually support that band. But my point is that I would as a constructive way to move forward from the situation where we don't want buns, but we still want to protect the interests of the minorities or the helpless, right? We have to have like mechanisms in place that provides for resolutions of situations like these. The reason why they're helpless is not because that is the nature of the situation, but because there is no sufficient infrastructure in place to make them not feel helpless in a situation like that. I think that there are certain provisions where like tribals get like certain privileges and advantages and stuff like that. But we as a country, we need to have like more efficient legal and protection mechanisms in place, and better media integrity, because like media is easy to pay off the media to stay away from certain things that are beneficial for the people who have the money to pay off them. So this is what I would say. Like, I don't want buns to be banned, but I want buns to be disincentivized, so that like nobody opts for that, because there are better solutions. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Raghav. Guys, we will now be moving into an unmoderated discussion. So if anybody else has a closing statement to make before we move into the discussion, you guys can go ahead by raising your hands.
I would like to do
Sorry, Saju.
closing statement.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so I think we all agree that Bandh is usually the last resort for anybody to express themselves. And with that, I would like to begin my closing statement by proposing that Bandh is actually the symptom of an underlying problem. The underlying problem being that a certain section of society is not being heard. And when I say not being heard, I mean to say not being listened to. And when I say not being listened to, I mean to say that they are being heard, and but they are not being acted upon as to whatever they are saying. And that is the symptom, largely the symptom across the world today, including in India, wherein a certain set of people have fought hard, tooth and nail, over years and years of movements to come to power, and they are in no mood to listen to others who are speaking against them, right? And this is I think this is the buns are actually a symptom. If a large set of minority population is not getting their voices heard, then it means that democracy is not there, even though we are holding elections, even though there are political parties in India. And that, I believe, is pointing to a very large problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Saju. Is there anybody else who would like to make a closing statement? I believe not. So we'll now be moving into a discussion which will be unmoderated. People will now not need to use the reaction button to raise their hands before you speak. But please make sure to maintain a decorum and do not cut other speakers off before they are finished. With that said, I think the floor is open for discussion.
And also everybody is limited to 1 minute. Yeah.
Maybe not 1 minute, but yeah, it will be appreciated if your points are kept short.
So what are we discussing on?
I think we can start with the question Saju had posed initially. Saju, would you like to
So,
pose the
however, it was actually answered by someone in the group, Suri or somebody, Harpreet or somebody. See, my question was the people who are supporting the eradication of Bandh as a political weapon or as a weapon of protest is crying about the aftermath of that weapon rather than talking about why that weapon was used in the first place. So their argument seemed to me in complete support of the British rule and their policies in India. Yeah, that is my question. So how is it different? Yeah.
Um, so actually, I like the point that Saju made. Probably not this one, but a little bit earlier. Like how it is different from Britishers, and that's an interesting one. Like, whenever somebody is disproportionately kind of put in a situation where they are not exactly comfortable. It doesn't matter that who is exploiting you, whether it is somebody from your family, somebody from outside, it is from different country, it doesn't really matter. You are seeing them as foreign, right? So when people are trying to say that it is the same nation, same nation, same nation, great. Like, in general, we do care about each other. We want to protect the integrity. But when somebody is struggling with something, let's take that protest that we are talking about, like with the uh, tribal community. Please excuse me, I forget the example. But like that is where we were talking about, like they were put in a situation where did it really matter to them whether Vedanta was like a British company or an Indian steel company? Like if they acquired it, they would not have a place to live. So like when people are going to some of these means, uh, which again is debatable, as I've already said in my opinion, but like people can clearly do see them as a foreign, and foreign doesn't mean like somebody outside the country, but foreign to them. And I think that's where some of the struggle varies.
Can I speak?
Sure, Harpreet.
So actually, I completely support this bunch and the protest and all. But I think we should not focus on the past. We should not focus on Britishers that left us like 75 years ago. We should focus on the present because the present that we focus will make the future. So yeah.
But can I speak?
Yes, Akash.
Harpreet, but the problem with that is that our present is guided by the historical dynamics, the way the British left us. And India is still tainted by various inequalities and injustices. And that's a big problem. And that affects how our political expression is being done. Okay, I understand. Bunds are a predominant tool of powerful political parties to express their political muscle. And that has been the case. But I still believe India has still have a lot of work to do with regards to addressing these injustices. And with regards to address these injustices, we have to appreciate that these injustices do exist, and the expression of it might differ from culture to culture, and we should be open about it. And what I would suggest, the answer I would suggest is that not a political or legal ban on buns, but I will like to have a change in conscience from the people both on the receiving and the providing end of these buns. The receiving end of the people should not see them in the light of suspicion, and should understand that this bun is something that they are resorting to as a last last resort that they have. And the people who are doing these bandhs also need to have a conscience in political conscience within themselves, that yeah, this is our last resort, and and they should have a good reason that we have exhausted all other political machinery or means to express our grievances. I believe that conscience change is good to address the problem of large scale political posturing or political misuse of bandh as a system. But that can only happen if we keep it legal and consider it as a legitimate means of political expression. At the same time, consider have a self-regulating conscience change in the larger public. Thank you.
Akash, won't be a simple acceptance that once may be right, may be wrong, but are a public nuisance. If we accept it, then don't you think it will help in taking that educated decision that yes, we know that it's a public nuisance and uh, it has affected or the thing is affecting us that much that we have to do this public nuisance in order to either safeguard our interest or the promotion of our values and interests.
Actually, the problem is that like we are too much focused on the status quo. Like civil rights movement in the United States was the public nuisance for many, and then that is the democratic country. Like United States was the biggest democracy at that time, and still such movements which basically craved for the basic rights of people was a social nuisance. Like the point is accepting the fact that there are people of dynamic and diverse and disparities that is living among us, and our country is not just about our economic and political satisfaction, but it's also about other people who have suffered many injustices and who are vying to come to the same footing on political and social landscape as ours. And I believe a conscience should change in this regard, that yeah, what is pushing these people to come take such a drastic step? I don't personally believe that anyone as a whole casually thinks, yeah, we should have a bandh, and they know the repercussions of that. They know the legal repercussions and the social sanctions that would follow. But what is pushing them? I believe even if there is 50% of them are using it as a political tool to posture their strength, but there are many other justifiable cases where it is as a righteous expression of their hardships and their historical injustice. I believe we should go beyond that, and we should, as I'm speaking from the privileged state, that we should understand these historical injustices and give them a space to express themselves, or work on to expand our political machinery to be more accommodative, so that they are not pushed into such extreme state of having to take such a step of bandh as itself.
So I will tell you one thing that happened many centuries back. Not many, I would say, around 1900s, 1920s. Was there was a radical idea proposed by some people in the Christian community and the Jewish community that we should introduce something called quote unquote weekend. That is, 2 days in a week should be off for people. That is Saturday and Sundays. And please don't laugh at this, but there were many people who proposed that if you let the worker class rest on quote unquote weekends, they will get together and do political debates and discussions, and they will rise against the capitalism, right? So this actually happened, and then Henry Ford, the great capitalist, also one of the odd ones out. He also supported the concept of weekends, and the support grew after many bandhs. I would say in those days it was called strike, worker strike, and weekends were introduced. And lo and behold, you and me are the beneficiaries of the weekend, right? So it does. So if bandhs were banned in those days, then I don't think these kind of things would have happened. What do you think?
Can I speak?
Yes, Harpreet.
So I don't know if you support Bandhs or you don't support Bandhs. First of all, some people say that this is a public nuisance. So the people who are protesting are also citizens of India. We have to understand that protesting is the basic right. And when someone doesn't listen to you, and you are sitting there waiting for a response to come, people might get angry over some issues, like we have elected people in power, we have elected the politicians, and when they does not listen to the public, what other options do we have? When they are not listening, when the source are not listening to us, when we are just sitting there letting our people die, because people in protest die, no one want to die in the protest. So I think one should not be illegal, and a solution should be found.
Right. If I may chip in, so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so if I may, I'm not discrediting anyone's citizenship. Don't hold the office for that right now. But I'm just saying that although people do have the right to protest, but uh, this is a proven fact, that it is a kind of public nuisance that leads to several people facing many issues. And although the protests are totally legitimate, they should happen. That's the basic character of a democracy. But it should happen in a way such that the political and the public order is not disturbed. Yeah, sorry, Suri. Interrupted.
No worries. I think we started the same time. Uh, so I think it seems like there is a high level agreement, like within the debate group. And I think two questions that I can clearly see, at least from my point of view, coming out is I think we do think some aspects of the ban should be made illegitimate, some aspects of it. And I think we can probably discuss that. And I think the second topic is what, what more means that should be available to the people who have to resort to that, so that this becomes not the most there are better viable options that people can take, so they will not resort to this. I think those could be a good extension of what we are talking about. I think that will help us make things a little bit clearer. If there are more and better ways, we can in fact ban a little bit more of the areas that actually do affect the societal aspect. That's my thought.
I think the larger question should be what should be the step before Bandh, which is effective. I think that's your second point. So I support that. So why is that somebody is resorting to a Bandh, and Bandh is usually not for an ideology. It is always to achieve a purpose, right? So what is that step before Bandh in which people can take, in which their voices can be heard, right?
Yeah, there are clearly some means, but we could definitely do better. And what those better could be, that will help us reduce the instances of burn cases.
See, in the farmers, I think farmers' protests have become kind of a favorite for people to explain this. In the farmers' protest, the lot of government officials and people started discussing with farmers after the Bandh started, right? And before that, the farmers themselves and their organizations reached out to many of their representatives saying that these laws are not good, right? But then after the protest happened, the government was willing to talk to them, which means the government of the day always has the opinion that unless there is a Bandh, these guys are not serious, right? So how do we make them believe it? It doesn't. It is actually counterintuitive. But Bandh is the way that the government also wants to see that people are behind this cause, right? It is like a, how do you say, It is like one of those cyclical arguments. Without Bandh, the government is not serious. Without the government being serious, there will always be Bandh.
Also, view is not that there is second side of the coin that due to so many bunds, the government has kind of been insensitized to the normal protest. The government don't feel it's important. The protests are important because the bunds have been made into kind of a common thing that if something is serious, then there is going to be a bun. I guess if buns are kind of reduced, then the protest will get more importance and hold more sanctity.
But the same thing has happened to other means also. For example, change.org. Hardly, I don't think anybody reads it nowadays. I don't read it. There's always a change.org petition in my inbox, right? And it's always there. And I have seen many issues not being discussed in public forum at all. Like, for example, uh, do you even know the number of trees cut down in the Hasdev forest, right? And nobody knows about this. And the government of the day and everybody, all ministries are in cahoots. Even the oppositions are in cahoots with people who are involved in it. So the public representation, whatever you're talking about, is out of the window, right? I don't care. I mean, I do keep getting this change.org links every now and then. I just simply put it into my spam folder. I just delete it. I don't even look at it. The same case with many of these websites which are asking for donation for people facing health challenges, right? I always keep getting this on my Instagram or YouTube or advertisements that such and such son is not well and he is admitted to hospital. Please send some money, like that, right? So the society is degrading slowly, but if you ban Bandh or which is the last means of protest, effective means of protest, then you are taking away representation and voice of the people itself, and it will happen after 5-6 years. All these people will be in the forgotten books of history. People think that all these things never happened in India.
I do understand your perspective.
It is the last resort, and it is a symptom. When the government of the day stops listening to people, then how do we make the voices heard is the question. At some point, these issues will start affecting every class of the people. Indian society is now divided into upper class, middle class, upper class, lower middle class, right? Middle class, sideways class, and those classes have come about and they have different challenges. For me, my challenge is high cost of tuition fees for my son. For some other guy, the challenge will be high EMI he has to pay or high rate of interest. For other guy, it will be burden of loans in which he took 10 years back, on which the interest is climbing up. Right. So those kind of things are like, how does society get representation in it? And in India, it is especially true. You just look at the economic figures from the government figures itself. 1% of the people are holding 60% of the income, and yet 60% of the lower class are paying the 60% of the GDP's contribution is coming from people who earn 25,000 rupees or less, right? Sorry, taxes, not GDP, taxes. right? And the GDP is held by the 1%. The rich are getting represented in the GDP because they are amassing lots of wealth, especially after Corona. And these inequalities, it is not felt by you and me, it is felt by the lower class, right? When they have to struggle 1 or 2 jobs, 3 jobs a day. We all have to do only one job a day, and we have weekends, right? When our turn comes, the poor will also think that, I'm okay, I've been through this hell, why don't you protest? At that time, we also would have brought in the Bandh rule, where there should not be no Bandh.
Right. We do get weekends on which we do political discussions, which the capitalists just there. But yes, the inequality part is very true because it is especially felt in India because of the taxes disparity that you rightly talked about. But uh, again, the main point comes to that thin lining itself, that at what extent can protest be allowed, and at what point we should stop. Yeah, because
I think we
we
should.
kind of
Protesters will stop protesting once their negotiations have started or negotiations have reached their goals. The farmers' protest stopped even if the negotiations didn't reach all the goals. Right? They stopped when the government agreed to like 30% of what they wanted. Not even 30, 20% only. There are still many farmers in jail because of the protest. 700 farmers have died. They have never been compensated. The guy who killed around 100 farmers using a jeep, he is out on bail, right? And there are many farmers against whom there are cases pending in courts, and that's the funny part.
I mean, bail is a big point of contention in the state right now, so I'll not go there. But
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, protest Bandhs is always against the government. And that part I've seen. Nobody has protested against rise in hike in the Geo telephone bill in India. Nobody has protested against Geo or Adani or anybody. The protest is always against the government in power.
I want to put one word here. Even buns have become very costly these days because we need to uh, take care of the expenses from breakfast to even dinner, and liquor expenses and all these things will be there. If one goes for a bun, the head of the political party should bear all these expenses. Bun has become a very costly affair these days.
But then life is also costly, right? Nobody gives us free jobs.
Then we should adopt an alternative ways of doing a protest rather than a ban. It's my sense actually.
Yeah, I like the idea proposed by Suri. There should be some other means, but there simply isn't any.
So for example, a hospital staff, nurses or doctors are going for a protest. So are doing a band. Instead of doing a band, they can attend the casualties in more number, and they can stop charging for it, because ultimately it is the hospital who is going to bear the losses. So in that way, they can give a protest. They will be attending more casualties, more emergency cases, more inpatient cases, and they will be not charged until unless their demand is fulfilled. So in that way, they can do a protest rather skipping all emergencies, casualties, inpatient attendance, everything. They can do in this form, because at the end of the day, the management should be into losses. It's not the ordinary people, are they themselves. So this is my view. See, we should alternate an adoption so that end of the day the organization or the government should go into losses. That is the more agenda. That is the more agenda or the bottom line of a Bandh.
Yeah. I mean, if we are talking solutions, then one solution might be adopting some ideas of the direct democracy, like recall or referendum, where we can recall the representatives that we have voted for, or have uh, plebiscite for these kind of issues, like the farmers' protest. Let's hold a plebiscite for just the farmers. They can decide whether they want the law or not.
See, it is difficult without the other party willing to listen. How do you make the other party willing to listen? All the protest, if you see, the other party is never willing to listen, right? Farmers protest, the first meeting with the government was held after 8 months of the farmers being on the road. I mean, what were they waiting for, right? And same is the case with many protests. And the people in power, whether it's a company or it's a government, they are always thinking, let them protest, and after some few weeks, the protest will fizzle down. This is the kind of thinking they are having, right?
They will come if you put a dent into their day-to-day activities and their income and their luxuries. If you put a dent into that segment, they will come and listen to you. Rather putting a dent into that or creating any disturbances into their day-to-day activities or derailing their income levels or luxuries and all these things, then they won't listen to you, because they will see their day is going very softly, painfully, plainfully. So why they come and listen to you? There won't be any reason to come to you to listen to your words. So my point is, derail their income, into their income levels, put them into their luxury life. All these things needs should be adopted.
Adding to what Raghu said, I guess everyone here is kind of upset with the government itself. So let's hit where it hurts. If you want to sensitize the government towards protest, then kind of pressurize your local representative to put forth a bill that whenever there is a protest in a specific region, the local representative have to go and solve it. If it's not solved within, let's say, 10 or 15 days, then the local representative will lose its power and incentives and the salary that it receives for the time until the protest is being sorted and there's law and order has been restored.
And I don't know where you are from which place, but I witnessed this Telangana movement in front of me, because I was a college student at that time. So I completely experienced how this Telangana movement started, taking to a big agitations and all these things. And hardly I could see any bunts in it. It was a larger, entire Telangana people, some from the nook and corner, they have stood on one stage and they have protested, and finally we got the state. So Telangana movement is again a big example of putting your word where the entire system will come and listen to you. So in Telangana movement, advocates have done their job, and lawyers, doctors, all they have. But instead of doing their job, they have given their bit of support to this movement. So maybe it is a political movement, or it's a civilian movement, or all section of the society has participated in this movement. And so I feel we should learn from these moments instead of adopting a Bandhs, Telangana movement, Marathi movement, state by any sort of that movement, which will be giving a good idea in getting our things done rather adopting this kind of Bandhs.
Yeah, rightly said, because any state reorganization happens through a simple protest itself. The idea of formation of Jharkhand began with the ideas stood up by my personal college. So these kind of things should be kind of promoted, that yes, just protest, tell us your demands. It might take us a year or two, but your demands will be met through the democratic means itself. And if we see the further result of these bunds as well, it is rightly said by previous speakers that it is a kind of a blackmail, and the government is kind of forced or brought down to the knees where they take unconstitutional decisions, they take decisions without the proper acceptance from the parliament, and in majority of the cases those decisions are being struck down by the Supreme Court of India as deemed unconstitutional and illegal outright.
Are we nearing a conclusion, guys?
Yeah, we can conclude from my end.
Great. So
Yeah,
maybe
we can.
I guess that's been
I
a
think this one must be your most peaceful conclusion.
I mean, I've had one other peaceful conclusion.
Yeah, true.
But peaceful or not, I think it's always great to hear so many different perspectives on one topic, to see how so many people think in so many different ways and all the opinions. It's always agree to disagree, right? So
Yeah,
that's
true.
great. That's great.
So I
I
guess
guess,
thank you for the great
yeah.
moderation rules.
Thank you so much, Prince.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you so much for your moderation. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great session, guys. All right. See you in the next one, I guess. Have a nice day, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.